everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss. I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me today for this episode. I always giggle at myself, I realize, at the beginning of this because I sound really like peppy and into it and really excited, and I feel like I'm an announcer of some type, and I'm just like, I'm sitting in my office and just sounding like a goon. But y'all don't know that, so I'm going to be excited, right? Welcome back to the Fearcast, everybody. This is your host, Kevin Foss. Anyways, we already talked about that. So this is a question and answer based podcast where you can send me, the podcaster, questions about you or OCD or anxiety or how it works and how you can treat it or how you can help a loved one with it. All that stuff. So send me those questions. You can send them over at fearcastpodcast.com, or the easiest way you can do it is to go over to Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over at the Instagrams. And you can send me a question over there by sending me a DM, clicking on the little microphone button, recording your voice, sending it in. Today, somebody sent me an audio question. They likely recorded on their phone, their voice memo, something like that, and then sent it via email over to questions@fearcastpodcast.com. Their audio question goes to the tippy top of the list. So I got this maybe a week and a half ago or 2 weeks or something like that. I've had a couple of things in advance of that, but those go to the top of the list. I do answer all of the other questions for the most part. All the other questions I get, I have them in backlog. They will all be answered in due time, by and by, whatever phrase you want to use. But the reason that they go to the top of the list with the audio ones is because I think they're really interesting, and it's your voice, and you're taking the risk to put your voice on the internet for people to listen to. I think that level of risk deserves some reward. So, got the line. Anyhow, if you send a regular question in, or I'm going to say an audio question in, and it is laden with profanity, if it is just not safe for any kind of work, I'm probably not going to put it up. That being said, if you have kind of like a run-of-the-mill OCD one where it's talking about taboo subjects and it might be sex and violence and that sort of stuff, I'm totally fine with that. We'll put that up. You know us. We love talking about that stuff around these parts. But if it is, how should I say, I don't know, above and beyond, extracurricular, that sort of stuff, maybe not fan fiction level, probably not, or I might edit it down greatly. There's been like certainly one, but maybe two that I've avoided just because they were too much. But that's rare, and I've been doing this for a long time. Anyways, this is a very weird side note, and I've had a lot of coffee, but I'm yet so tired. Maybe if I slow down on the coffee, I could sleep. That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, I hope everybody out there is doing well. This episode is, I'm recording at the tail end of OCD Awareness Week. This will be hitting your podcast inboxes at the end of it, I suppose, when it is over. So I hope everybody had a wonderful week. I hope everybody found information out there that was helpful. Podcast or articles or websites or YouTube things that or outlets and personalities and writers and therapists and advocates who are and will be helpful and encouraging to you. So there's a ton of voices in OCD land, and all of us, for the most part, are saying the same thing. We say it in different ways. So my hope for everybody out there is that you found someone or something or some place that speaks to you and is giving you the information that is encouraging and motivating and informative to help you tackle it and help you get back to your life. Isn't that the point of all of this, right? So, all right, let's get on to this. I will say, so I posted a couple of videos, and I'm going to record one right after this. The majority of the videos that I've made, the vast majority of the conversation has not been about the content. It has been about my mustache. Now, my mustache is Yosemite Sam style. It looks like, if you've ever seen the movie Tombstone from the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, the one with Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer was not the star of that, but he was the star. It was the Val Kilmer show. Anyways, so I look like one of them, and I'm fine with that. No one is stopping me yet. So it's going to keep going. If you would like to go onto one of those videos, watch it, and you have some critical things to say about my mustache, go for it. If you have delightful, wonderful, encouraging things to say, I would love to hear about those. If you hate it and it's the worst thing you've ever seen, keep your opinion to yourself, man. Anyways, it's a side note. We don't need to get too aggressive. All right, let's get on to Aaron's question. So, I'm going to play Aaron's question. It's a tad long, but I'm going to play it anyways because I think it's actually really interesting, and I think it is indicative of what we see a lot in private practice, right? So I'll give you a snapshot in advance, right? So he's talking about an overlap between two different subtypes, ROCD and harm OCD, which we don't often hear on this podcast. We hear a lot of ROCD and sexual orientation OCD, or HOCD is what it used to be called, and some people still call it that. Anyways, but we don't hear a lot of the overlap between those two. I think that is one of the reasons he asked the question. So that is one of the reasons we are putting it up here. And I think it's an interesting overlap. But we see that, we see these overlaps, and it's not really talked about in a whole lot of other arenas because people want to have it be really clear. We're talking about harm OCD. We're talking about relationship OCD, or we're talking about contamination. And oftentimes in the world of private practice, perhaps you out there are experiencing the overlap. There will be, and that is okay and expected, and not a surprise to the vast majority of OCD-specific therapists out there. We've seen it, we've heard it, and remember, at the end of the day, it's OCD. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me play Aaron's question, and then I will get on to Yammer about it. All right, Aaron's question, go.
Hi, Kevin. Love the show. I think it's one of the best OCD resources out there. You're very relatable. And I say that having just found it about a month or so within the last month to 6 weeks. Very relatable, very informative, very knowledgeable on the subject, obviously. And when I discovered that you take audio questions, I was excited to submit my question because I haven't really heard it discussed other than maybe twice on other podcasts or video casts. So I was hoping that maybe you can give us your perspective. Just to give you a little bit of background real quick, I was diagnosed at age 16 with OCD, and my main themes then were emotional contamination mostly, and kind of germ contamination. Although looking back now, I see my current themes kind of played in there a little bit. My current themes being harm OCD and relationship OCD. And I think the harm OCD kind of played out back then, looking back with my parents, more so my mom, but she's still alive. She's a really tough woman, and I didn't really have to worry about her. My dad is the one I had to worry about a little bit more because he kind of he had OCD himself. He had suffered from hoarding and a lot of checking behavior, so we were kind of worried about him more than my mom. And I was am the youngest of 4 kids, so I was the baby, so I didn't really have to worry about too many people. Like now, being in a relationship, which is that's my real question here, is getting to the point. Been in a relationship for 5 years with my partner. She's wonderful. We have a really good way of addressing any issues or, any arguments, things that come up. It's a great relationship, but like any other relationship, romantic or not, there's things that come up and you have to address them. You have to solve them. You have to, find a way to work through them and whatnot. So Related to harm and relationship OCD, sometimes relationship OCD will hang on something that they said, or some imperfection, or something that we interpret as being not right. Just that feeling of not right. It needs to be fixed or it needs to be addressed. And we try to figure it out. We don't like it. It's disturbing to us. And maybe just to give you a scenario, you have the ROCD thought come in. It says, "Oh, I didn't like the way that tone was, or I didn't. He's too tall or too short, or whatever it could be, right? Some thing." And then you have the harm thought, right? You have a thought, you have an image or an urge, even, which to me in OCD are the scariest. There's been several times where that thing in the past has kind of put me in bed for at least a day to several days, because you're trying to figure it out. Was I going to do it? Did I want to do it? Just being scared, right, of it in general. And just a quick little bit of background. We moved in about 3 years ago. Like I said, we've been together for 5 years. And when we moved in, that was obviously really difficult on my OCD. It was obviously difficult for both of us because it's a change, but especially for OCD and harm OCD and relationship OCD, it was trying to pick everything apart. And, lots of fear around knives and being in the kitchen and things like that. And eventually was able to work through that. And now it's kind of like almost a backdoor spike thing, where when you have the 1-2 punch of the ROCD thought and then the harm thought, image, or urge, and it's still scary to me, especially when you have the physical sensation of, oh, was I going to pick up that pen, that pencil, that knife, that hammer, or that piece of glass, that whatever it could be. And it's, really scary. And so I've been able to kind of work through it, but, I just kind of am interested in what you might have to say about it when you have co-occurring relationship and harm OCD, because obviously those are really often tied to an individual, right? And or a circumstance. So it's, you could be in the car and sometimes I'll have a thought that she said something that she didn't even say, and how I would react. Would I get mad? Would I reach across the seat and strike her, and would I grab that pen in the cup holder and stab her? And it's so disturbing and so, you know, anxiety inducing that it really leaves me shaken. So I haven't really heard the crux of those two addressed. So I was hoping to get your perspective. Thanks.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much for sending that in. All right, let me pull up my notes here. So we're going to talk about this. I'm going to kind of split this up into the two different components. We'll talk about relationship OCD stuff, and then we'll talk about the harm OCD stuff. Now, as you said that there's an overlap, and I'm going to get to that because perhaps you've heard me explain, or what my opinion or my stance is on relationship OCD is that it is most often relationship level stuff, regular relationship stuff that is responded to with OCD. All right. So what that looks like is, struggles or issues or complications or worries or insecurities found within a relationship that oftentimes can be or ought to be or should be, whatever verbiage, depending on the circumstances, can be dealt with relationship and communication improvement and cooperation. Now, some stuff cannot be accomplished through that because two people together won't exactly match up on everything, and that's expected. We're going to perhaps talk about that later. But relationship stuff responded to with OCD, responded to with rumination, responded to with mental compulsions, responded to by trying to get reassurance from other people, responded to by avoidance, right? All of these kind of traditional compulsive tactics found in OCD as a means to deal with relationship stuff. All right. So that's why we want to separate those two. And we're going to talk a little bit about those things today. But interestingly, in your case, it sounds as if, and again, all I heard, everybody, is what y'all heard. So it's your relationship, your ROCD is responded to with harm OCD obsessions, is what it kind of sounded like. Maybe I misheard it, but it's like, rather than going, oh my gosh, maybe I married the wrong person or I'm with the wrong person, it's like, I should murder this person. I wonder if I should. Anyways, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So to address the ROCD first. So when something is said like, so it sounds like you were saying like, when something is said that you just don't like, I get curious about like what it is about it that you don't like. Right? So it kind of made you feel a certain way. So we want to be able to address relationship issues as relationship issues, right? What I would encourage you to start to think about is like, how can you and her work together to find better ways to communicate your needs and communicate what the different problems in the relationship, being flexible with one another to try to find a solution that's going to work for you two, to work to make subtle adjustments that might make the relationship the best it can be, right? So, we sometimes talk about, triggers within the relationship that bother somebody about the other person, right? It's, oh man, they say this kind of word wrong, or they leave their cabinets open, or they don't put the jar of the mayonnaise on really well, or they're too tall or too short, or that they're too, they have curly hair and straight hair. We had an episode a long time ago about someone with concern about curly hair versus straight hair. I forget the exact details of it, but the point is that we can get really wrapped up in some of these quote, small details that become giant details because there's something about this person that bothers them. Well, when we have something about our partner that bugs us, which there will be a plenty of things that bug us about our partner, we want to find a way that we can communicate that. Now, if it's simply like, hey, I don't like the fact that you have curly hair and you have straight hair, I mean, there are more tactful ways to share that. And the question is it livable for you, or is it something that can be worked on together? So like a basic communication thing, is it something where, she responds in a very negative sort of way, or she, uses really aggressive kind of language that kind of rubs you the wrong way? Now, I can certainly see somebody ROCD grabbing onto it and saying, oh my gosh, see, they're always like this. They're such a negative person. Oh, my girlfriend from college, my girlfriend from high school, they were so kind and so loving and so caring and so empathetic. And they never used this kind of language. Maybe I should have just been with that. Why did I even break up with them anyways? Now that we're on the subject, let's talk about other ways that my college or high school girlfriend differ from the person that I'm with. And you see, you kind of go through this all ultimately to try to give you this reassurance that you picked the right person, that everything's okay, kind of saying like, okay, I can balance it all out. Maybe they're not that bad, or trying to figure out, like getting yourself to this emotional place where everything's okay, or giving yourself reassurance that it's not the worst possible relationship in the world. Now, that can also be dealt with through a conversation with your partner. Now, we as people need, and I speak to myself on this too, we need to be able to recognize the things that we want and the things that we need within relationship, not just with our partner, but with our neighbors, with our friends, with our bosses, with our coworkers, right? With our employees, right? Any sort of relationship that we can. It's what am I missing? What am I needing? What am I wanting? Now, the next step is how do I be bold enough to communicate that need to the other person? Because your needs matter. Your needs are important. So you can communicate those. It doesn't mean that we get everything that we want. We can say, hey, it kind of bugs me that you are negative. It bugs me that you use really aggressive kind of language in this context. Is there a way for you to be able to use kinder, softer language? We can be empathetic people. We can be kind people. And it's just a positive quality that I like to see. And I was hoping, or I've seen in you, perhaps. So we can communicate that. Now they can say, hey, go F yourself. And the person who uses really angry language, they might say that. But we can communicate those needs. Again, we might not get what we want, but we can share that and maybe figure out a way to work through that issue. Now, there are going to be some things that are just simply unchangeable, quote, unchangeable. If they're too tall, too short, etc., if X, Y, or Z is too big or too small, that may not be able to be changed. There are just simply some things that can't be changed within a relationship, or the person is unwilling or incapable of changing those things. So we have to then make space for that and consider how is it that we can make this relationship work and maybe not have that in the relationship. Can we round this person up that maybe they're not perfect? We can say, we're going to take all the good stuff that they have and say, this is the price of admission. Dan Savage talks about this where he says, there's no the one. And in fact, Shiva Rajay, in her book on relationship OCD, she calls it the myth of the one, right? Motu. So both of them kind of talking about the same thing. Dan Savage will say there's a lot of 0.86s or maybe 0.75s, but no the one. And we take that person and all the differences that they have and we round them up to the one. And the difference between what they have and what they don't have is called the price of admission. I have to deal with this in order to be with this person. In order to have the 80% that they have, I have to deal with that 20%. And I have to find a way within me to deal with it. And trust me, they're doing that for you too. Don't you worry, Aaron. You ain't perfect. There's stuff that your partner is doing for you. They're going oh man, they're like that. They've got that, I don't know, that bald spot or that cul-de-sac head, or they got pimples, or I don't know what they got. But there's something or some character flaw or character thing that they're rounding up to. Anyways, so finding a way to communicate that and to see how you can make that work and trying to do it in the most kind way you can. But anyways, I think you get the idea. So maybe that's something that can be talked about with a therapist at hand. Maybe you can talk about that with a good friend, but something worth considering. The other thing to consider is what does it feel like when she says things you disagree with? Meaning, so instead of making your partner change, what feeling or insecurity would you have to sit with? Okay, so kind of like saying this, she is who she is. She looks the way she is. She talks the way she does. She has a view of the world in the way that she does. There's something within yourself that says, that's not quite right. That's not okay. But why isn't that okay? And is that not okay for her, or is that not okay for you? So I'm curious, and this is not for everybody, I suppose, but it's also to say, is there something within you that when she says or does what she does, or she looks the way that she looks, what does it make you feel? Is there an insecurity you have to sit with? Is there something that you are projecting? Are you projecting a problem within yourself or a feeling onto her and kind of saying, I need you to change this so that I can feel better, so that you can change, so you can save me from this experience that I have that I don't like? And sometimes that's where rumination comes in. How do I fix this? What can she do? Talk to friends and get reassurance. Hey, is this a problem too? Are you seeing it? Oh, okay, I don't feel so bad. Or, oh, it's not that bad. Okay, I can convince myself that it's not that bad. I could think about comparing them to my past partners, to a fantasy person, to what would it be like to be in a relationship with this whole other imagined person? Would they have that thing so that I can momentarily feel whole again? and now I can move on, until you realize that nothing ever changed. So I gave you some options, some kind of multiple choice, as it were. It doesn't mean this is for everybody. These are just some ideas that I haphazardly wrote down. So consider, is it the possibility that the feeling that you're having is the reality that sometimes you are annoyed by your partner and are not in constant relationship bliss? Is it the possibility that you would be you will be displeased with your partner sometimes? And that's hard to realize or hard to accept. Maybe the reality that she does not reflect, that she does not reflect the unrealistic expectation of beauty that you felt entitled to have. Is it that her perfection was supposed to make up for your imperfection? And you're upset that you are with another imperfect human. So now you're going to have to accept your own imperfections too. Or again, simply that you picked the wrong person and you're stuck with them for the rest of your life. Right? So this kind of gets to what's the core that's motivating this. So there's a lot that's in that and a lot to consider. I know that I'm hoping that you're unpacking some of this with a therapist, or that you are talking about this with a trusted person who understands what OCD is. Because all those things that I just mentioned can certainly feel uncomfortable, can certainly be motivating that discomfort that you're then saying, I need to outsource the fix of this to this other person. If they just change that, then I don't have to have that feeling again. But the problem isn't them. Most of the time, the problem is you. I say most of the time because, again, there can be some, communication things that could be dealt with through the way that they respond to the world, like I just mentioned in my earlier example. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself or backwards around myself. All right. More stuff to think about. All right, so let's talk about the harm OCD thing. So a great comedian once, and I forget who, I tried to look it up, I just couldn't find it, said, if you haven't thought about killing your partner, are you even married? I love that joke because sometimes you get mad at your partner. I hate to tell you. So you get mad at your partner, then sometimes your brain starts doing some silly things. When we're angry, when we're upset, sometimes our brain thinks of angry and violent and upset things towards that other person. It's kind of like, well, if I don't like this person, boy, you know what? If I shot them into the sun, they wouldn't be much of a problem anymore. Boy, you know what? This person that I'm with, man, it's a struggle to be in a relationship with this person. But if they were dead, I wouldn't have to worry about them anymore, right? Now, OCD can grab onto that and say, oh my gosh, why are you thinking these violent thoughts? That's not okay. What does that say about you? You must be a violent person and wants to do this because don't you know? People who have violent thoughts want to harm people, and people who harm people have had violent thoughts. But that's you, right? So what do we do in compulsion about this? We try to suppress the thought. We try to undo the thought by thinking a happy thought, a wonderful, loving thought. We avoid people. If we're violent, well, if we stay away from people, we're not going to harm anybody. We ask our friends, you think I'm a nice person, right? We over the top are nice and kind to everybody else because if you wouldn't hurt or if you wouldn't harm even the littlest thing, well, you certainly wouldn't kill your partner, right? Or just simple reassurances. I'm not going to kill her, right? Now, all of those can become compulsive. All of those can become compulsive. Anyways, so what can we do about this? For you, Aaron, this is also assuming that you don't actually want to harm her. I'm going to trust that you don't. There's a great book called The Imp of the Mind. What's hilarious about this book is that there are always two sections that throw people off. And they are two sections that I am certain that a lawyer told the author to write. And it is sections, I think it's sections on like harm obsessions, and it might be like pedophilia, or it might be violent thoughts. It might actually be all three of those. But anyways, there are sections where they're like a couple of just paragraphs where they're like, hey, so hear me out. I know we're talking about OCD and it's not real, but For some, it might be. So if it is you, go talk to a doctor, go talk to a psychiatrist or something like that. Just make sure, and I think this is the thought, make sure that you can't point back to this book and be like, see, the book told me to kill this person because they said it wasn't me. Anyways, I think that's what it was. Point is I don't even know what my point was. It's a good book. Oh, assuming you don't want to actually harm her. I'm going to assume it. So one thing we can do is that we can accept just the presence of these thoughts, right? With that idea that sometimes we get angry thoughts, and yet you haven't followed through on them, yet you haven't enacted harm on anybody else, assuming. We can then acknowledge the fact that we have those thoughts and feelings and just say, yeah, that's people stuff. That's brain stuff. Maybe it's a sign that I'm angry. And maybe you are in that moment. And can you accept the fact that maybe you're upset or angry or annoyed? And that your brain goes to extremes. I know my brain does. I bet a lot of people out there who are listening to this, their brain goes to extremes too. So we can say that's maybe just a human thing and not that I'm a crazy person. You could lean into it and say, yeah, I might. Now we're going to get to the ERP in a moment. But we can use those thoughts as a red flag to say, okay, this might be my OCD acting up because when I get these kinds of thoughts, it tends to be harm OCD. So, you know what? I'm going to take the risk and to not do anything about it and just accept their presence and move on and be the best partner that I can, knowing that those violent thoughts are there, knowing that my brain does silly brain stuff, and we'll see what happens. We'll deal with the future when I get there, when I actually start to make active plans, when I actually do something, then I'll deal with it. But until then, I'm not going to. Some exposure and response prevention things that can be really helpful to manage and tolerate these thoughts. Scripting can be really helpful, just kind of maybe even a story that you write out in first person, present tense, that perhaps you live forever with her, or you get married, you stay together, and you just live the rest of your life having these violent thoughts, and you're just disappointed in her appearance forever. Maybe that in this story, you actually enact this violence on this person, and you never find a partner after that, or you go to prison and you're rejected by everybody forever. Or in this story, she finds out that you have these violent thoughts and she rejects you forever, right? Or that you live the rest of your life and you feel inadequate for the rest of your life, or incomplete, right? So there's a bajillion examples. Scripting can be a great example or a great tool for engaging feared thoughts while resisting compulsions, because the key part to all this is the response prevention, right? It's writing the story, letting your brain marinate in a thought, and then letting go of compulsive behavior that would try to undermine the anxiety. We're trying to embrace it, lean into the feeling to make space for it, and to say, I can feel this and I can have this thought. And it's not a danger, it's not a threat, it's a thought and a feeling. All right. Writing down words can be a simple and effective thing you can do. You can write the word kill like 100 times every day. You can write stab, murder, maim, amputate, whatever it is. Write all those words out. I like having clients write all those words, write them on big pieces of paper, stick them to the wall, and we just kind of sit in a room with all these words around us, and we have to just feel the feelings of that, the discomfort of it. I would encourage you to cook together, right? You said you're worried about knives. Great. Use knives. Use knives around her. Carry a knife with you. Have a pocket knife with you at all times. Remember, if we're trying to challenge these thoughts and to show ourselves that these thoughts don't have any grounding to them, well, then have a knife with you, because if you're a murderer, well, it's going to be a lot easier to kill someone with a knife on you. But we're also trying to show yourself that you can have a knife and you can live your life, and that it's going to be okay. Probably for the most part. Do all the things that you've been avoiding. You can also watch the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer, right? So if you've ever seen it, it's a fun Mike Myers? Maybe, I think that's the name. Is that the guy? Is that Jason? No. Anyways, doesn't matter. So I Married an Axe Murderer. Watch it. So the other thing that my wife reminded me of is that she listens to all sorts of manners of books, but one book that she's listening to right now is called Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. It's this book about where she describes, and I think this is a fantastic premise, where some murder happened. I think this is the story. Some murder happened, and the protagonist, the main person in the story, has the voice of someone in her head that's constantly trying to kill everybody around her. It sounds like exactly the book that every person with harm OCD should be listening to or reading. And for you, Aaron, I think that might be a good book to read to kind of tolerate that thought. And you can have one earbud in as you listen to that, as you kind of hang out. Maybe you're making dinner with your partner and you got this book in your head and you are making space for this experience. So anyhow, Aaron, I have talked your ear off and I've talked everybody's ear off more than I thought I was going to. So if you have thoughts or feelings about this, message me. If I left something out, everybody, add something. Send me a message. I'll include it in a future episode. But Aaron, I hope this has been helpful. I hope this answered your question about you kind of heard some overlap. I hope this was consistent with other people. And I hope it was helpful in pushing you forward in a positive direction. So again, thank you so much and best of luck with the process. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously.